And just like that, we are live. Hey folks, this is another test pilot for the Reviewing Network Live, and as you can see here, this is the first time we're using the official intro for the show. And before we get to the topic I want to cover this week, I do want to mention something that I did a couple of days ago. I figured, since this is going to be something that I'm going to be doing weekly starting in September, I wanted to give this thing that I'm doing here, the Reviewing Network Live, its own YouTube channel. So I did indeed start another YouTube channel called the Reviewing Network Live, and I've already put a couple of videos up there, including the little teaser I put up on Wednesday, as well as an original version of the Flash video I did last week, because as you saw, there was a part there that I forgot to put in the original episode, and then I put that clip in later on, but I decided to put them together for this particular video on the other channel. So if you want to go ahead and check that out, go to the link in the corner here so you can see the channel that's in the making there. And I'm going to have more on this coming up in the next couple of days. I have a video that's going to come out on July 1st, which will be the 10th anniversary of when I officially announced that I was making this website. And there's going to be some other announcements as well coming up there as well, so be on the lookout for that. And I'll have more on that coming up in the next couple of days, so be on the lookout for that. But in the meantime, let's get to the conversation that I have planned for this week. So this week, I wanted to do something a little bit special, a little bit something in my personal life here. And I figure, why not this week talk about my influences, the things that inspired me to get to the point where I am today, not just in making the website, not just in investing in the YouTube channel, but also just in general, what made me want to get into movies, what made me want to get into movie reviewing per se. And I've got a list here of all these different influences that I've thought about and I've decided to cover in this particular video, just things that made me get to the point where I am right now. So this is going to be a long video, so I will put I will put chapters for each influence if you want to see any one in particular. So let's go ahead and get started then. Let's start off with my first influence that I have here. And really, it could start back to something that I talked about not too long ago in the animation domination video, when I talked about one of the shows there, which was the Critic, the show with Jon Lovitz as the New York film critic, who is very much encapsulates both a mix of Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel. I'll get to them in just a second, but the Critic was really one of the first major reasons why I wanted to become a film reviewer. And it's funny because it's a show that's really a parody and satire of film criticism and just movies and life in general, slice of life in general in New York City in the 1990s. And I really need to do like a special video for the special thing for this, because we're coming up on the 30th anniversary of the show in January. So I think I'm gonna do something special for that. Maybe a month where I cover each episode, but I haven't decided on that yet. But The Critic's one of my favorite shows of all time, man. It's a show that's just so funny. The parodies are great. The movies that Jay Sherman has to watch are just so ridiculous and over the top, and yet somehow they would still be much better than some of the actual movies that came out. Like, I don't think anybody who saw the first episode of The Critic, realized that almost 30 years later, we actually had more than 5 Home Alone movies, because that was one of the first parodies they ever did. The show was very funny, the voice cast was great, the animation was really good, and it really kind of opened my door to what life would be like as a film critic. I remember watching this for the first time when Comedy Central used to play it on late night TV all the time. That was my first exposure to it, and then a couple years later when the DVD came out, I watched the DVD so many times. Like, every time I go on vacation, and I'm either driving down or I'm flying down, I'm always going to have that on, because it's usually my comfort food TV show, because it just makes me laugh every single time I watch it, man. It's just a show that's just so entertaining. It's so well done. It's well animated. Like I said, I'm going to delve more into this in the next couple of months, but The Critic was one of my first major influences in life, and that kind of led me to the next major influence, which shouldn't really come as a surprise to anybody. And that is, of course, the film reviews of Roger Ebert and Richard Roeper. Like, they were the two. I mean, I know Gene Siskel came before them, but even Roeper were the first two major film critics that I actually knew about. I knew about Gene Shalit. I knew about Rex Reed, mostly because I knew about Rex Reed mostly because of the Critic, but Roger Ebert and Richard Roeper were the first two critics I ever fully watched on TV. Every Saturday night on the local ABC affiliate here in Pittsburgh, WTAE, their show would always be on. Ebert and Roeper would be on after the news, or sometimes it would be later in the evening, like around 1 o'clock, 1:30, and it'd be the last thing I usually watched before I went to bed. And it kind of helped me want to become a film critic more, because I got into their reviews so much. And then I caught the last couple of years of the show when Roger Ebert and Richard Roeper were still there. And then Roger, of course, he left the show in 2006 when his health issues got in the way. And it's always interesting when I look back at some of Roger Ebert's film reviews, because when I caught Roger Ebert for the first time, this was when his voice sounded much different than it was in his early days, which I'll delve into more in a second when I talk about Gene Siskel. But it's very interesting how that panned out of the way. And I caught the last maybe 2 years when Roger Ebert was still on that show, and then Richard Roeper eventually had different guest hosts come in. I think Jay Leno was a guest host at one point. They had people like Aisha Taylor, Kevin Smith, I think John Mellencamp was actually a great guest on there. Other critics like A.O. Scott, Michael Phillips, just notable, just names that you might be very familiar with in terms of like not just film reviews, but also just just like in celebrities in general. Like I didn't think who would have guessed that Aisha Tyler from Whose Line Is It Anyway and Jay Leno would end up being film critics, and when they were on, they were actually not that bad. I mean, I could see them actually doing something like that if they really wanted to commit to it. But yeah, the last couple of years of that show I watched for Roger Ebert and Richard Roeper, and then during the last season of the show, they started putting the older clips from the Siskel and Ebert era online, and that was my first exposure to what Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert brought to the table. Because really, Richard Roeper is a great film critic, but you could tell that he loves movies. But when you watch the old Siskel and Ebert clips, you really can tell that these two loved movies. Like they really worship movies. It's like they really understood the power of what a great movie can really do. Like their craft on how they reviewed movies is just so incredible to watch. Like every once in a while, I'll go back to their sneak previews days where they had the episode where they basically went by the numbers on how they go into movies, how they go into a movie, going from before they see the film to the type of things they do before they go to a movie. They talk about how they review these films and how they actually end up coming together at the end. It's a really great video, by the way, if you haven't seen it already. I'll go ahead and put a link to it in the corner if you haven't checked it out. But it's a really entertaining piece of media there that I go back to every once in a while. I've always wanted to try and do something like that similarly. I actually tried to do that once back when Deadpool 2 came out, but what happened was I got the clips I had there screwed up, so that didn't work out so well. I want to try to do it again at some point, maybe down the road. So that might be something I might want to try out again. But like I said, Siskel and Ebert, when these two reviewed movies, you could just tell they really were committed to their role to this. They really knew exactly what they love about movies and how they're going to show it off here. They were not shy of being too negative to a film too. Like when they wanted to be terrible, when they wanted to badmouth a movie, they badmouthed it in a way that just feels natural. And they not only they probably both, but I mean, when the reviews didn't click very well, when they didn't connect, it was also magical too. Like the great arguments they had on different movies was just so amazing to watch. I mean, their spats between stuff like, Carnosaur, or Stop When My Mom Will Shoot, or Benji the Hunted, those type of movies. It's just like, man, this is just so much fun to watch. Those clips were just so much fun to watch, and you just see how important Gene Siskel was to that show. And Roger Ebert, as much as he tried to carry the load of Richard Roeper, nothing against Richard Roeper per se, but Richard Roeper really, it was a tall task to follow up the greatness of what Gene Siskel left behind. And like I said, I have nothing against any of these guys whatsoever, especially Richard Roeper, even though it feels like I've been bad-mouthing him more, but he and Roger Ebert were part of a major part of my life when it came to deciding that I wanted to be a film reviewer for most of my life. And like I said before, like, it's interesting watching those older clips with Siskel and Ebert and seeing Roger Ebert with that a much different voice than what he had when he in the last couple of years of his time on the show. I guess that was maybe an after effect to the health issues he was dealing with here. But my first time watching Roger Ebert was those later years, and it didn't take me until I saw the Critic for the first time when he and Gene Siskel guest starred that I knew that he had the different voice to it, which was very. It was an interesting experience nonetheless, like to see that though. Well, like I said, I mean, Roger Ebert, Gene Siskel, Richard Roeper, these guys really played a big part of my life and actually made me want to become a film critic largely because of those things. So they were a big part of my life as well, and that leads into probably my next biggest influence in life. And I've talked about these guys long enough, not just here on the channel, but also on the website as well. And those guys are the guys at Spill.com and later on Double Toasted, Corey Coleman, Martin Thomas, who on the Spill website was known as Leon, and even guys like Chris Cox, who was Cyrus on there, and C. Robert Cargill, Carlisle. Of course, he's become a pretty prolific film writer nowadays, and of course the co-host 3000, and I don't think I've ever talked about this particular thing that makes them so important in my life on this channel, but when I graduated high school in 2007, I went to community college in that fall, and I took a media class thinking that I was going to do the same thing that I was able to do in high school, because I had the review show that I had on there in high school. I thought, okay, I'm going to this media class now, and I get a chance now to actually do what I want to do in life, and that's do a film review show long term. And when I got there, really community college just really was. That was one of the most stressful times in my life, especially that first year. I mean, I was struggling to keep up. Like there were classes that really were taking a toll on me. There were classes that I thought I was doing good in, and then all of a sudden, because I didn't do the work the way they wanted me to do it, I ended up failing those classes, and it really was putting a lot of stress on me, and it was a tough time for me when I got out of high school and went to community college the first year. I mean, it was a real struggle those first couple of years, but it kind of worked out in the end, because I eventually found Spill.com during that tumultuous time. I think it was around February '08, I think it was, that I actually found them, and they really did get me through a lot of trying times. I mean, I owe a lot to what these guys did over at Spill.com, especially Corey Coleman. I mean, I've always been a fan of his work. I've always respected him for the stances he takes, his way of reviewing movies, and he's had a lot of reviews that made me laugh a lot. So did everybody else on there. And then when Spill.com went down and they eventually went on to Double Toasted, and some of the guys went on to do their own thing, I followed them as well, and I owe a lot to these guys. Like, these guys got me through a troubling time in my life, and they really got me to come back to doing what I wanted to do, and that's really going to do film reviewing. And like I said, they played a big part of my life. And so when I eventually started the website, which was originally going to be a site within a site, with the hope that maybe I'd make this into a full site by the time a year had gone by. But then when the site went down that December, I basically had to rush to actually put the site together so I can actually start doing it now, and is sooner rather than later. And the results speak for themselves. Over 10 years later, the site has become. This is part of my life now. Right now it's a side job, but hopefully one day this is something that I could do full time for a living. And again, it kind of all stems back to that first time I saw them on Spill.com. I mean, I'll never forget when it happened. Like, I found a review for the first Alvin and the Chipmunks movie, and it was their review, and that kind of helped me get established to them. And I eventually found their other reviews and their website, and they had just started a couple of cold ones when that happened at the time. Just really a lot. I owe a lot to these guys, because they got me through a troubling time in my life, and they eventually helped me get inspired to actually do what I've been doing now. And I owe them a lot. I owe them a great debt I'm eternally grateful for them, I should say. And I owe these guys a lot. They got me through a troubling time. And so yeah, that was one of my biggest influences, was having them in my life when I needed them the most. And around that time, another person came around that I found online, and I caught a lot. I was able to figure out a lot of what I wanted to do with the way I wanted to handle the future of my reviewing career, and that was, of course, is the nostalgia critic, Doug Walker. I caught his reviews fairly early on when he began, probably around, might have been a year after I found Spill.com. It was around 2009. I think his first video was actually 2 years before that. And I've been a fan of his work for many years. I like the way he handles these nostalgic movies and TV shows that I grew up with, whether they were good or bad, or just of the time period. And his style of comedy and humor as well, as talking about these films from his perspective. It really influenced me a lot of my ability to review movies and shows, especially later on down the road, deep into the website's run. And the more I watch this stuff, the more I've come to the realization that he and I kind of have a similar taste palette for just movies and shows. It's not just for movies and shows, but how we feel about certain forms of entertainment. Like, for example, how he and I feel that misery is the key reason that makes comedy great is one of the things that I really take from it, because, you have comedies out there that think they know what comedy is all about, but they really don't know what comedy is all about sometimes, some of these people. And like these chick flicks, like they think that is like the reason why a lot of these chick flicks don't work is because they don't feel like that misery is the key to make comedy great. And you need misery to make for really solid comedy. I mean, Tom and Jerry, the Looney Tunes, classic animation. I mean, is spoof movies like the Naked Gun films. Misery is the key reason that makes comedy great, and it shows in those films as well. And also that movies and shows, one of the things I also kind of agree with him is that movies and shows that don't apply to the field usually don't end up making for great entertainment. And when he gets personal about certain subjects and rants, you really do feel like they're justified, because take, for example, some of the ones he was doing after he got back from doing Demo Reel, like his rants on Pearl Harbor and the fact that you have all these people that are getting attacked, and he has the whole thing about how there are naval men that can't swim, even though it was later proven that that was kind of not the case. There was actually people that were in the military during World War II that couldn't swim, but at the same time, he has family that has been in the military, so that isn't like the whole thing about that particular segment. I think really struck out to me. And like stuff like that, as well as his rants on The Last Airbender, like how M. Night Shyamalan completely just took the magic away from what made the Avatar series so special, The Last Airbender series, I should say, and The Haunting one, which is just one of the most brilliantly manic rants I have ever seen. It's one of the most hilarious rants ever, because that felt earnest. That felt like what you really would think that the people who wrote The Haunting remake probably felt about the original film. Like they just wanted to make a dumbed down version of a classic movie. And so they take this thought-provoking classic horror film from Robert Wise, this classic thriller, and just dumb it down to make it like a typical generically bad. It's just a film that has a terrible villain, a terrible CG effect, and the character has to basically win the battle by defeating it with the power of love. It's just like, you feel that urge, you feel that rant, you feel that rage that he feels. I mean, you just felt it from him, and it felt like it was coming from an earnest place, but it also felt like he wanted to do something that was really funny and really enjoyable and entertaining, and it definitely works. People like the Angry Video Game Nerd and Armac21, who are smaller but just as important influences to me. Like, they have great rants as well, and I think that both of them really did play a big part in my style of comedy in a way that I really came to appreciate. And the fact that they made their livings off of these type of rants, and when they did it well after their first times I ever saw these, they still remain hilarious even after all these years later. And a lot of these influences, they definitely played a huge part in my years establishing this website and the years on the site as well. But then there's the ones that came to defining an identity for the YouTube channel content I would put out later on down the road. And one of the guys that struck out to me right away when creating the YouTube channel content was the Flick Pick, or John Flickinger, or John Flickster as he was back in the day. I first saw him when he was still deep into collecting DVDs and Blu-rays. I think that was probably around maybe 2014, 2015, I think it was. And I've talked about it before that I have a pretty significant physical media collection of DVDs, Blu-rays, 4Ks. I connected with him right away, and it struck me right out of the gate, but I also found his humor and his way of making videos by going to these places such as Best Buy, Walmart, Target, Disc Replay, among others, to be pretty fascinating. And it did help me in a way to help me create Movie Stop down the road, which became the show that it is today. And I took a lot of that influence largely because of what I saw from the Flick Pick. And on that same note, the very similar Durant Cinema, who stacks up an impressive steelbook collection himself, was another major influence in the evolution of what Movie Stop eventually became, as well as my collecting habits, as well as my steelbook growth has gotten bigger since I was introduced to him. So thanks for that, David. But I mean, I've sent him some stuff before, in videos in the years since then. And he seems like a pretty cool dude, and it's like he's a very fun person to watch. Like, you could tell that he is fully committed to some of the craziness that he pulls in a lot of these videos. Like, he'll show up to Best Buy wearing these costumes that is just like, if I tried to do that in real life, I don't know what would have happened. But like, only somebody like him can go into a store and dress up as either John Wick, Buddy the Elf, or wear a Ninja Turtles mask, or the Ghostface mask from Scream, and everybody would just look at it and go, "Yeah, that seems pretty normal." Then again, he's probably done it for so many years, and they've just gotten so used to it. It's just like, it's just another Tuesday, and that's really what I like about him. Like, he's very committed to the comedy he has on his channel, and just to entertain, and he does a pretty good job at it too, and I really admire him for that. And going back to the Flick Pit, because of him, I was actually introduced to other people that he would hang out with. It started off mostly Chris Stuckmann, because he appeared in a couple of Flick Pick videos, and then later on after that, when I go to the recommendations for Chris Stuckmann, you'd see Jeremy Jahns there, and through the cameos Chris made in Jahns' videos and Jahns appearing in my recommendations, I found both of them very intriguing and interesting. Like, Jeremy Jahns' review style, when he does these reviews of fast-paced speaking and editing, quick editing, and makes for a very interesting concept for reviewing movies that I hadn't seen in a while, and it also makes for really hilarious comedy. You've seen on this channel in particular, I've made a couple of YouTube poop shorts based off of those videos that he did, and it's just a ton of fun to watch. Even after all these years later, I can still get a good laugh from them, watching them after all these years later. And with Chris Stuckmann, he strikes me as probably the closest reviewer that I've seen that could come as close to showing his love for movies in the same way that Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel did back in the day. When you watch his reviews, you can definitely feel that this guy has a feel and appreciation for what makes movies so special, something that seems less and less present these days. And I think I've talked about in the last video how he makes a lot of good points about the way film criticism has changed over the years. And he's also not afraid to go on there and talk about things that are very important for film lovers, specifically dealing with annoying moviegoers at movie theaters. He'll talk about how people won't stop talking, people will get on him because he's trying to enjoy the movie, and even the tiniest thing, they'll go out after him, and like, stuff like that relates to me. I've had those situations like that where some people just don't understand what makes the movie so special, going to see them in a theater, and instead just want to use it as a place to just go there and just go talk to people while they're supposed to be watching a movie. Like, I always felt like I had a love for movies close to how Siskel and Ebert did back during the good old days. I mean, I love movies. I love movies a lot, but I never feel like I've gotten to the point where I can really show it. I think Chris definitely has gotten stuff into it as well. Like, I've tried in recent videos to try to establish sort of a similar style of reviewing like he does, but honestly, I haven't really perfected it as of yet. And that's part of the process of doing this. Like, you just gotta keep doing this, and then one day it'll finally click on what kind of a direction you want to go with here. And I'm learning every day. I'm learning every week when I do these videos, and I took a lot of inspiration from what Chris Stuckmann did, as well as Jeremy Jahns, as well as the Flick Pick and Durant Cinema. Now, of course, outside of collecting physical media, one of the other forms of videos that I do every once in a while are, vacation logs and daily vlogs, and that influence comes from the Tim Tracker, who is a YouTube vlogger from Orlando, Florida, who ever since 2009, he's had a daily video come out of everyday life, which is what it was at the beginning before eventually evolved into what I would consider the one place to go to see the latest from all the theme parks and attractions in Orlando, such as Disney World, Universal Studios, SeaWorld, Busch Gardens, Legoland, many others. Like sometimes they'll go out, they'll go away from Orlando. Sometimes they'll go to Disneyland. Sometimes they'll go. As there's been a couple of videos where they've gone all the way to Tokyo Disneyland. And for somebody who doesn't usually see a lot of those videos on there, that's really cool to see what Tokyo Disneyland looks like when you see people that's actually been there. It's really it really is fascinating. It does make me eventually want to go to those places at some point, but just money issues, all that type of stuff. It's until you could get enough money to actually do something like this. These videos perfectly fit what you want to see when you want to see those different attractions. Plus, Tim Tracker, I knew about it was because of them I knew about Adam the Woo later on down the road, the Daily Woo, and View for the Cheap Seats, Justin Scard, those type of guys, those type of people that were kind of in that same area that they were in my recommendations, kind of like how Jeremy Jahns was in the recommendations for Chris Stuckmann. And there was a stretch over 7 years in the last decade where my family and I would take a trip down to Orlando, and whenever I wanted to know what was going on and what was new at the time down there, I always went to those videos. Tim and his wife Jen were the first people I usually went to online, as they had a ton of videos showing what the updates to the park were at that time period. And it's great just seeing them together. They have a lot of good chemistry. They seem like fun people, and I would have liked to have met them in real life, which, truth be told, I might have actually passed by them at the parks and just never noticed it. Although I do think one time I did actually see him there. He had the glasses on. This guy had the glasses on and had his hair similar to his, which I think it was him. But it just took me a long time afterward to realize that maybe that was actually him or not. But it's not that I didn't want to get in the way or anything. But it would have been nice to. Who knows? I could have been wrong on that. But it would have been nice to see him at some point, which. The last couple of years we haven't been able to do it, and maybe the next time we eventually go down there, hopefully I might check. Hopefully we'll see him at some point, but they're fun videos to watch. They're all videos I always go to on a number of occasions, and they also played a part in me wanting to tackle daily vlogs. I mean, there's been attempts when I've tried to do daily vlogs, and they have not been as successful as I would have wanted them to. Like, there'll be times where I try to do a video every single day, and it just wouldn't come together as well as I wanted it to, because there's not really a whole lot that I'd want to get a whole lot of footage of that would make for an entertaining video. And then I tried to do a weekly version of it, and then I tried to do it again not too long ago after I got back from Ocean City about 2 years ago, and that never really went anywhere. And despite that, that's where I took a lot of the inspiration for those type of videos that I wanted to do. Another influence as of late has been Cinema Sickness, who's a YouTuber who's very similar to the Tim Tracker in terms of daily vlogs and also being a Disney fanatic and would occasionally go to Disney World on several occasions. But on top of that, he also goes to several thrift shops and flea markets in the Pennsylvania area, because I think he's somewhere by Philadelphia. I think he's somewhere outside of Philadelphia. I think he said he's from. He looks for stuff to sell at these different flea markets and thrift shops to make some extra cash, and usually comes across some really cool nostalgic stuff. He goes into a lot of Goodwills, and we'll usually find a lot of really cool stuff inside of there, which kind of made me want to go to more of these different Goodwill shops and also these flea markets. And when the pandemic happened, and I didn't really have a whole lot to do in terms of money-wise, other than my job that I get paid for, I started selling stuff on eBay and then later Mercari, and it was mostly because I saw what these guys would, what a guy like Cinema Sickness was doing on there. And it was because of him that I knew exactly what to look for when it comes to looking for stuff to sell in my neck of the woods at various thrift shops. I have a couple of thrift shops that are down not too far from where I live, but there's a lot of things I learned from them. One of the most notable things that I would have never figured out beforehand that I probably should have thought about was, checking DVDs and Blu-rays for scratches and damages, especially kids and Disney DVDs. And, because you see these and you think, okay, maybe Disney stuff sells, you can probably get some money for it. And then you see these videos. He goes inside and sees these DVDs, and they look like they could sell, but he opens it up, takes the disc out, and then you turn it around. The thing looked like it was sawed in. It was like shredded to pieces. Like, what the heck were these kids doing? Like I don't know. Do you watch a lot of movies where that happens? Where you watch them so many times they get scratched to no end? And I guess that's more common than I thought it would have been. And I've been to a lot of thrift shops, and I've seen those scratched DVDs, and there's a lot of times when you will have those scratched DVDs there. Like, it's not something that is uncommon that I thought it was before. And I have actually bought a lot of stuff that he sells online. I bought some stuff from his Macari store. I think he also has an eBay store too, but I haven't checked there in a while, so I might have to do that as well. But there are some cool nostalgic stuff he has on there. I'll go ahead and put a link to that below in the comment section. In fact, all of these influences I'm mentioning here, I'll put them down in the comments section so you can go see them for yourself. And yeah, Cinema Sickness played a more recent part of making these videos, because when I do my movie stops, and I get a chance to go to these places, I try to show them off to you people out there, so you could see what these type of places look like if you're ever interested in wanting to go into that, to add that to a hobby that you do for a living, to go to these flea markets and make some extra cash finding some stuff that maybe you could sell. So the last one I have here is, my last influence is somebody who I've essentially been following ever since I joined YouTube, like right after it started, like around 2006, and it was UrinatingTree, and the name actually started off as originally The Fat Man Judgeth, and but most people know him now as UrinatingTree. UrinatingTree, of course, does a lot of sports videos with a lot of really funny rants, really funny comedy attached to it. And I remember him back when he was the Fat Man Judgeth, and he did these video game reviews that were so hilarious and still hold up after all these years. Like, his reviews for stuff like the Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade game is great. The Superman Sega Genesis game, I think it was, the Dark Castle reviews, the Sonic 3D Blast, all the NHL games, the NBA games. Like, they were a ton of fun to watch. And kind of like with the Nostalgia Critic and the Angry Video Game Nerd and Armac 21, he thrived on these rants that he would have. Like, they are still hilarious rants that still hold up after all these years later. And he went from being a video game reviewer to being a pretty damn good sports video maker. Like, he makes a ton of really hilarious sports videos that fit that style of humor that I've become used to with all the way back to when I first saw him the first time around. And he makes a ton of really good videos. Like, he's really hilarious. He really knows his stuff. Like, you could tell that he's passionate about about different sports and all in the videos and the topics he covers in these videos. And it's just hilarious to watch. Like, he's one that you could say that he's been around long. He's been on there longer than it's just as long as I've been on YouTube the whole time. He's somebody that I really go back to every once in a while, and he's just so hilarious, man. Like, he's still hilarious even after all these years, and I can't recommend him enough. Like, he did play kind of a major influence in the way I do content here on YouTube, because it kind of I can't reach those levels of emotion and passion that he does in the videos that he has, but I try my best to come close. It's kind of like with Chris Stuckmann. Like, I'm learning every day, and hopefully one day I'll be able to perfect that down the road. But UrinatingTree really is one of the last major influences I have here to mention. So there you go. Those are my major influences, not just here on YouTube, but also the website, and also my life. These are things that I always go back to. And there's a lot of other shows and movies that kind of played somewhat of a little bit of an influence in terms of the style that I became so attached to. But those are the ones I really wanted to cover here in this particular video. Those are the ones that I always go back to and look at. I always remember how these people really affected me in the way that I was able to get this channel together, as well as the website. And I don't know, I thought it'd be something very cool to cover in this particular case, something personal in my life. So thank you very much for watching this video. Let me know your thoughts down below. Let me know what kind of influences you had. If you're a content creator and you make videos online, or work on a website or anything, what were your biggest influences? What made you want to do what you're doing now? And let me know down below. I'm really curious to hear what you guys would have to say about that. So with that said, thank you very much for watching. Like I said before, we have a new YouTube channel that's going to be this place to find the full episodes of the Reviewing Network Live when we start doing those in a couple of months. And like I said, July 1st, it's going to be an anniversary video talking about the plans that we have for not just this channel here, but the Reviewing Network Live channel, including the premiere date. So be on the lookout for that. I'll put a link to the subscribe element here for the Reviewing Network Live, as well as one for the Reviewing Network channel if you want to check that out as well. And also a playlist if you want to see some of the other videos I've done here. And here's my last video that I did for The Flash. And with that said, that's about it. So once again, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you got some enjoyment out of it. I know I had a good time making it. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys for the next video. So until then, take care.